have to say this is my favorite program of the year, and I'm so glad that you were all here to share it with us tonight. We have a really great lineup for you, and I know that it's going to continue our tradition of heartwarming stories that will make you laugh, probably make you cry, and make you really feel closer to the community. So I don't want to take up too much time because we have a really great event. I did want to Gertrude Blanks, who's our manager of the town's Office of Employee Development and Community Engagement, and she's going to give us a short welcome.
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, that's what I like to hear. I am Adrienne Billings-Smith, as Laura said, and thank you, Laura, for hosting this year. And I want to thank the First Church, who has previously hosted this event. We moved it over here so we could. The First Church did an amazing job. Let me first say that. They did an amazing job hosting it. But we wanted it to connect back to our library because that's where Gertrude was connected through her community. And we thought it was important to connect those two communities. I like to tell people borders are invisible. And when you learn about Gertrude's life, through some of the stuff our library historian has done, and through all of these storytellings the last 4 years that we've held this event, you learn how closely connected we really are. And Gertrude's mission was to love each other. You can see in all her videos that was her mission, was to be kind to one another and to love each other. So I'm so happy that we're getting to host it in a library. Books were her heart, storytelling was her heart. I want to give you a little history how this all started. So 4 years ago, the town of West Hartford, if you happen to walk up these stairs, you saw our beautiful mural out there. That was created by a group of people in this town. I was lucky enough to lead it. And I have my friend Rosemary Tate here and Gail, she's back there now. That's who we were waiting to start the show for. Gail Crockett, who made sure that we said and supported and recognized and acknowledged that Gertrude was a part of our history in West Hartford. As we did that mural, that was the biggest part of our mural, was making sure that we saw our history, our present, and our future in that mural. So when they brought up making sure Gertrude was there, I didn't know who Gertrude was at that moment in my life. I had heard things, right, as you go around. I'm originally from Florida, so that gives me a reason not to know Gertrude directly. Thank you. But having her as a beacon at the front of our library, front and center, again, connects our two communities. And when you have folks who speak up about their community and say they want to be seen in it, those things are important. Look how many people are in the room today because of one woman who has connected our two communities. And there's probably people from other communities as well, but connection is key when we're doing these things and these programs that we run. And that's important to my office. That's important to our library and the folks who do the hard work. Leah came in last year.
Yeah.
I want to thank Leah. And she's done an amazing job of helping me develop my own programs, our film and discussions that we host together monthly. And it's because we want to tell these stories. This is what keeps us connected. This is what keeps us grounded. So we're so happy to be able to continue this and make it bigger and better and connected to Gertrude as much as possible, and bringing in folks who knew Gertrude, who had a personal relationship with Miss Blanks, as Mr. Wyche said earlier. We were formal when we first met and started working together. Mama Blanks, as people called her, in informal settings. Those are the connections that we need to continue on as a community and see each other in those ways. And like I said, her biggest mission and thing was about love and kindness and making sure kids had access to books. And that's what we need to continue to fight for as we think, when I say a call to action here, that people have access to stories and access to history. And that's what we want to continue here at the West Hartford Public Library in the town of West Hartford. So without further ado, let's get this party started. I'm going to introduce our first storyteller. Mr. Wyche held many positions during his career in the libraries, including as 23 years as branch manager at the Albany Avenue branch of Hartford Public Library and 21 years at Bristol Public Library. He and Ms. Blanks worked together during their time at the Albany branch. Let's welcome Mr. Floyd Wyche.
Gertrude Blanks was a staff member of the Albany Avenue branch of Hartford Public Library when I became the branch head of Albany. For the next few minutes, with your imagination and with my imagination, I am going to paint a picture of Gertrude Blanks at the Albany Avenue Branch Library. Oops. Let's get started. A class is coming in, probably third grade, probably about third or fourth grade. Mrs. Blanks is going to do whatever Mrs. Blanks was going to do, which we found out was to talk about the library, but to also tell an African folk tale. So, it's a very nice African folk tale. It's about a little girl who's very industrious, a little boy who's kind of naughty, and the villagers. Oh, no, that's fine. I have a tendency to. Okay, so let's get started. She starts telling the story. The little girl is very industrious. And then she stops. She says, "You, yes, you, come up here." And the little girl said, who, me? Yes, come up here, come up. So the little girl comes up, and Mrs. Blanks continues to tell the story, how the little girl plants the seeds, and the little girl plants seeds, and how she waters the seeds, and the little girl is watering the seeds. And then she talks about the river and the turtle. There's a turtle in the river. And she says, yes, you, come on, come up here. And this little boy, he's sitting there like little boys who, me? Yes, you, come up. So, he came up, and she said, "You're the turtle. You're in the river." And she started describing how the turtle was swimming, and the little boy starts swimming. And then she mentioned the fact that the turtle got out of the river, and turtles aren't too fast, and the little boy started being a turtle. And then eventually she talked about the villagers, because you had to have villagers, of course. And so by the time she got to about half of the tale, the entire class was participating because she needed villagers, and of course, the rest of the class were villagers. I looked at that, and those kids were having so much fun. They were laughing, and I knew that they were having a lot of fun, and I knew that that visit was going to be a memorable visit for them. But later, I realized something. And what I realized was Mrs. Blanks was introducing those children to African folk tales. Not that there weren't a lot of African folk tales out there, and not that they were not easily found, but Mrs. Blanks probably had an idea that those children did not know that those kinds of folk tales existed, and she wanted to introduce them to the folk tales. This picture is coming along, but it's not too good. I remember, of course, it's a sunny day. It's warm. It's a non-school day. Mrs. Blanks is having a program. Lots of kids are in the building. I'm sitting at my desk. A child comes up to me. He tells me Mrs. Blanks wants to see me. "Mr. Wyche, I need some donuts." "You need donuts?" "Yes, I need donuts. I'm running out of donuts and I want every child to have a donut. Okay. I bought donuts. And once again, I thought about that. That was typical Gertrude Blanks. Mrs. Blanks thought a lot of children. And not only did she think a lot of children, she wanted to give children as much as she could give them. So the picture is coming along pretty well. But you know what? Oh, that's right. That's right. It is a school day. A class is visiting Albany to see a movie. The students come in, and once again, I would imagine probably third, fourth grade. They take their seats. Mrs. Blanks is standing in the back. What? There's a lot of conversation going on back there, and it's loud. She is having a very serious conversation with a hand puppet. I'm not making this up. This is true. I saw it. The hand puppet was really upset with her. And Mrs. Blanks was trying to calm the hand puppet down, but the hand puppet would not have any of it. And don't forget, I was to show the movie. I honestly had no idea what all of this was about. Eventually, the hand puppet said to Mrs. Blanks, "If you're not careful, I'm gonna turn you into a frog. Boys and girls, would you like for me to turn Mrs. Blanks into a frog?" They all said, "Yes!" That is the truth. But fortunately, Mrs. Blanks was able to calm it down a little bit. And then the hand puppet said, "I'm not going to turn you into a frog this time." Mrs. Blanks put the hand puppet away, walked to the front of the class, introduced herself, introduced the movie. Everything went along very well. Once again, I had some thoughts about it. My first thought was, what in the world was that all about? But then it dawned on me. Mrs. Blanks knew that third graders, fourth graders are fidgety. She knew that. And she knew that she needed to do something to get the attention of every child there, but not only to get it, but to keep it. And she did it. She figured it out. She figured that depending upon the group, you have to have something that will get the group's attention, and you must keep the group's attention. Because what works for this group doesn't work for that group. So, the picture is coming along pretty well. There is one more scene that is perfect. And the reason why it is perfect is because you will see and hear Gertrude Blanks. And the reason why you'll be able to do this is because we have a short video of her. So let's take a look.
You want to look into your future. Well, you came to the right place. Let us look into the crystal ball. I see books. Lots of books, many books. I see books about far-off places, spaceships, and strange creatures. I see joking little books and books about magic. I see books about almost anything you can think of. Let us go back to the crystal ball. Perhaps we can get our answer there. It's hazy. It's getting brighter. It's clearing up. I see a sign, and the sign says Hartford Public Library. I can't help you anymore. You must go to the library and find the books in your future. Goodbye.
So the children went to the library to sign up for library cards. Each child had to fill out an orange application. Each child filled in his name, address, school, grade, age, and telephone number. After the children filled out the applications, each child asked a parent to sign the back. When they got their library cards, the children were able to select books. There were many kinds of books to choose from, just as the gypsy had foretold. After they had chosen the books they wanted to borrow, the children took the books to the desk to be checked out. The due date was printed on a slip of paper which the librarian put in the back of each book. The librarian reminded the children to bring the books back on time.
I wonder if the gypsy can help us pass our next test.
The picture is complete,
Perfect.
but we have to frame it. And I found the perfect frame for this picture. It is the frame of love. Mrs. Blanks loved children. She loved libraries. She loved the community. She loved storytelling. In conclusion, I want to thank you for joining me in remembering a very special person, Gertrude Blanks.
I'm not crying. You're crying. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Leah Farrell. I oversee the programming here at the libraries. I wanted to introduce our next speaker. also a friend of Gertrude and a great storyteller like Mr. Wyche was, and also the inspiration for this year's theme, Everybody's Grandmother. Mr. Andre Keitt, if you want to come on up, is a longtime storyteller, educator, and a friend of Miss Blanks. He brings his storytelling programs to schools and libraries all over the state.
You know, I always find myself following Gertrude Blanks. And I tried my best to do my best because that's what you just got to do. And what I mean by that is, first of all, let me say it's so good to be here tonight to see some familiar faces. I can call some names from the past, the recent past, and way back when I had dark hair. And I first went to Hartford Public Library in 1987, a year after I got out of South Carolina State University, HBCU. And upon graduating, I got a job that first summer, I got a job at Camp Current. Yeah, got the job as the program manager for Camp Current. And I called the library because I'm going to have to call Gertrude Blanks to come to the camp to do some programming. I mean, this is my first step out here. I want to have a success, and I knew she would be the person to do that. But I remember Gertrude when I was a kid, and she was working at Barber Branch Library. And I would go to Barber Branch to get my materials to do my oral presentations in school, and there was Gertrude. Then later on at the Artist Collective in Hartford, where we were in the same drama class. And so I got a chance to do some things outside of the library with her, not knowing my future after getting out of school. I would end up following her footsteps. I call the library because I need Gertrude Blanks to come. And they said, she doesn't work here anymore, she retired. I said, oh, okay, well, who do you have in her place? Oh, no, there's nobody in her place. I'm like, I'm in trouble because I don't know what am I going to do here? And I said, well, what did she do? Hey, Julie. I said, hey, Cecil. I said, what did she do? And they told me all the things she did. And I found myself going, well, I can do that. I know how to do that. I can do that. And they said, well, come on in and fill out an application and drop off your resume. I said, okay. I go in my street clothes, and they fooled me. They interviewed me that day after giving me a day for an interview on the phone in the future. And I got there and they interviewed me on the spot. And by the time that date had come that they had signed me up for my interview, I was working at the Hartford Public Library. I was like, okay, it caught me off guard. I had all the right answers. And I had a drawer and a desk. And they said, all the wonderful things we want you to do that Gertrude did, you have no place to create those things, and there's no storage for any of that either. So I said, okay, fine. But I do know that every time I went somewhere, I was hearing, well, Gertrude didn't do it like that. Gertrude didn't do it like that. And I'm thinking in my head, well, she did it in heels. I can't follow. So here I am tonight trying to follow Gertrude Blanks again. But the interactions I had with her once I started that job, and also when we would do shows together through the Artist Collective, were always magical. You are not going to be bored, as you see. You're not going to be bored. I remember her telling me that, or telling a friend, they asked, well, what's Andre doing? Have you seen Andre? And she says, yeah, he's somewhere making a whole lot of money. And I was, when you get out of school, you're trying to pay your bills. So I was doing that. And they would say to me, I don't know if you remember this, Sarah. Where's Sarah? I I joined this storytelling guild called Hither and Yon, and we were traveling in hither and yon to go do these stories. And they would say to me, Gertrude is making it hard for us because she's not charging enough money. And I was like, I didn't know how much you were supposed to charge, but I learned by being in that guild, that group. And Gertrude couldn't charge any more money. She was on Social Security. They would not let her do that. So you did a lot of learning vicariously through Gertrude. But she's one of the people that got my storytelling career started, because that's what I did at Hartford Public Library. That was our outreach program. Send folk out into the community to do storytelling. And I was fledglingly doing so in the very beginning. And I just used the tools that my grandmother gave me, because she was the first person to tell me stories and make me feel like I could tell stories, because I was enjoying her storytelling at laptop so much. So much that I decided to write some of her stories down. And the one that I'm going to read to you tonight is called Early Sunday Morning. She was in the kitchen at the sink washing the last of the breakfast dishes when the telephone rang. Mrs. Martha Greatheart Thompson, we call her Mama Thompson, was getting ready for church. And as usual, she was fixing her Sunday dinner early that morning before she left for Sunday services. She wanted everything to be ready when she got home after a long day of praising the Lord. I hear someone saying, As she spoke on the phone, the smell of simmering collard greens, 3-cheese macaroni, black-eyed peas with rice, and her world-famous dinner rolls was seeping through every corner of the little kitchen in the back of her house on Gough Avenue. Since all of her kids are grown and gone, these regular phone calls from them are a highlight in the life of this very colorful grandmother. After raising her children in a very busy household, she finds herself a little lonely sometimes, especially since her husband Bubba had gone on to his glory several years before. But Mama Thompson keeps herself busy writing letters, baking cakes and pies, spending time with family and friends, tending to her garden, and attending church services at her church, Burning Bush Baptist Church. As a matter of fact, I made that up. That wasn't it. Just saying. As a matter of fact, it was St. Paul. As a matter of fact, she finishes talking on the phone with her children right after she wishes them all well. They tell her how much they love her, and she replies, I hear you, and I love you too. I gotta go to church soon. No, I gotta go. I don't want to be late. Bye now. She kisses them through the phone. Hanging up the telephone, she begins to hum happily and whisper sing the words of one of her favorite hymns. I don't feel no west tide. She checks on her simmering pots on the stove. Come too far from where I started from. She wipes the kitchen counter and table off one last time. Nobody told me that the road would be easy. She shuffles in her lavender bedroom slippers and robe down the hall toward her bedroom singing, I don't believe he brought me this far to leave me. Now this Sunday is like any other Sunday, and not only has Mama Thompson prepared her Sunday dinner in advance, but last night she laid out her clothes for Sunday. You know, getting ready early is a grandmotherly thing to do. In many ways, grandmothers are like the Boy Scouts. They stay prepared. Having prepared her 2-piece suit with gloves and matching purse and pumps all in her favorite color of purple, she's almost ready. All she has to do is select the perfect matching purple hat, and she's good to go. But what a challenge this was going to be. I got a robe up into the kingdom, ain't it that good news? I got a robe up into the kingdom, ain't it that good news? Mama Thompson sings as she slides open the mirrored doors to a huge closet housing a store load of multicolored hats. Each shelf stores a selection of sorted hats of almost every shape, size, and color. There were hats with feathers and hats with ribbons, hats that she wore for all sorts of occasions, hats for the rain, hats that were plain, hats that made sure she had hat-wearing fame. There were fancy hats and hats that had straps. There were big hats and little hats and hats with small flowers that she wore to baby showers. There were hats for all seasons, and for a million of reasons there were just so many hats. And after making what she thought was a perfect choice, Mama Thompson sang, "I got a crown up into the kingdom, ain't that good news?" She bent and twisted the wide brim on the hat, covered with purple and lavender flowers at the top. "I got a crown up into the kingdom, ain't that good news?" Gently setting the hat down on a wig head, Mama Thompson smiled and began to powder herself with sweet-smelling powder. "I'm gonna lay down this world," she finished dressing. "Gonna shoulder up my cross." Took one last look at herself in the full-length mirror. "Gonna take it home to my Jesus." Put some of her individually wrapped red and white mints into her purse. "Ain't that good news?" And off to church she goes. Good news. Now one thing you can tell when you see Mama Thompson dressed for church is that she loves, simply adores the color purple. It is the color of royalty, and this regal lady wears it well. Stepping into the church, she lifts her head and peers from beneath the wide brim of her beautifully decorated church hat. As she gazes first to her left, then to her right, Mama Thompson spots her two best friends, Mrs. Brown and Mrs. Green. Now, I did not make that up. That's what their names were. As she begins to walk way up front to greet them, all eyes are on the lady wearing wonderful shades of grape, blueberry, and plum. All of the church visitors who will be asked to stand up and welcome her later, they whisper to each other, "Who is that lady dressed in purple?" Church members say of this silvery white-haired woman, "Oh, that's Mama Thompson." Mrs. Brown and Mrs. Green are sitting right up front, and they've saved a seat for Mama Thompson. They've gotten to church early because getting to church early is a grandmotherly thing to do. Just as Mama Thompson gets settled between her two best friends and make final plans to have dinner at her house after church to discuss their fishing trip and other matters, Sister Clarice comes gliding in. Now, Sister Clarice often arrives at church late, right before the choir marches into the service and the service is about to start. You know those type. She's wearing one of the tallest hats you've ever seen. Her hat is so tall and covered with so many ostrich feathers that no one can see around her. Sister Clarice marched into the church, down the center aisle, just like she was modeling in a fashion show. When she gets to the row of seats right in front of Mama Thompson, Mrs. Brown, and Mrs. Green, she stops, turns, snaps her head around towards everyone like she's having her picture taken, and smiles. Her long wig slaps Mrs. Green right in the face. Then Sister Clarice sits right down in front of Mama Thompson and her friends. Now, they can't see the pastor or the choir. Well, Mama Thompson's mouth flew open. Mrs. Green stopped fanning with a fan, and Mrs. Brown was poking Mama Thompson on her side with her elbow. Just then, Brother Bernard started playing the piano. Sister Naomi started up on the organ, and little Darrell Bryant began banging on the drums. Then the choir marched in. How I got over, how I got over. The ladies didn't say another word. They just sang and swayed to the sound of the music. My soul looked back and wondered how I got over. That afternoon, at dinner, at Mama Thompson's place, Mama Thompson laughed. Green? You should have seen your face when Sister Clarice slapped you upside your head with that head full of hair of hers. I know, said Mrs. Brown, as she buttered one of Mama Thompson's delicious dinner rolls. Thompson, said Mrs. Brown, you sure put your foot in these here today. They are so good. Thank you much, Brown, said Mama Thompson, but about Sister Clarice, I think she acts like that because she doesn't have many friends at church. Mrs. Green said, Sister Clarice just wants a little attention sometime, and she sure know how to get it, too. Lord, I remember last February, said Mrs. Brown, for Black History Month. She really showed out. Yes, sir, Miss Green said, slapping her hands. I remember that, too. Pastor had asked us to wear African-like clothing each Sunday to celebrate our heritage. Now, Sister Clarice hadn't worn a stitch of African clothing all month until the fourth Sunday, when she came busting up in the church wearing that long evening gown with the leopard print design on it. But what really got me was what she was wearing on her head. All three women laughed real hard and they said, a big, gigantic diamond crown. Now, ladies, said Mama Thompson as she passed the tray of rolls to her friends again. Sister Clarice doesn't realize that growing older and being alone does not mean being lonely. I think we should invite her to one of our dinners, or maybe she'd like to go fishing with us. I'll do the asking. Is it a deal? Mrs. Brown and Mrs. Green, they look at each other, and they each race to get the last roll off of the tray. And they say, all right, Thompson, it's a deal. That's the end. Martha Greatheart Thompson, affectionately known as Mama Thompson, my grandmother, was Martha Greatheart because she was the baby of 12 siblings. And they called her baby. All of her contemporaries called her baby. Now, if I called her baby, I'd be in a lot of trouble. She'd smack me into next week. Couldn't call her baby. But her grandfather, her father, was Paul Greatheart, and he was enslaved, and he rode the one-horse buggy to the one-room schoolhouse and took the little white kids to school, where he would promptly go up underneath. You know, some of those houses are up on brick pilasters, so he would go under there to stay warm and lean his back up against the fireplace. And he would hear the lesson. He learned how to read and write that way. Now, we got folks in school, in the classroom, looking at the teacher. They're not learning anything. So we want to work on that. Okay? However, when emancipation came, he did not want his slave name. He took a stick to some sand and scratched letters until he came up with the name Greatheart. And that is how come I call myself the Greatheart Griot. Thank you for listening and being entertained tonight by my stories. And I'm so glad that you guys, this is my second time you guys asked me to come to do this. Ask some more, I'll come back again.
He'll be back, don't worry. Next up, I'd like to invite up Aaliya Lal. She and her sister, Naya, wrote a story together about their grandfather. Aaliya and Anaya are students here in West Hartford, and they're also both members of the West Hartford Immigrant Teens Club. So you want to come over?
Hello, everybody. I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to speak here today as we remember and celebrate Gertrude Blanks. My maternal grandfather is exceptionally inspirational for both my sister and I. His life story has been very influential for us, and I would love to share it with you today. When my grandfather was 1 month old, he was displaced from his home in what is now Pakistan and fled to India during the 1947 partition of India and Pakistan. His parents left almost everything behind because the main concern was getting to India as fast as possible for their safety. Therefore, he grew up in a refugee colony in India, walking a mile for a bucket of water and building their life from the ground up. One of the stories I remember him telling me about is how his parents owned a convenience store and made and sold chocolate to support their family. My grandfather told me about how his father used to trade chocolates with the bookstore owner in order to get children's books for my grandfather to learn to read. My great-grandparents were not very well educated themselves, but they prioritized education for my grandfather. My great-grandfather got many English children's books, so he and my grandfather learned English together. My grandfather's ability to speak and understand English helped him gain admission to a good school in India, which was a large factor in his journey to attend the top medical school there. Eventually, he received a master's degree from MIT, became a medical doctor and scientist, and came to teach as the head of the Department of Physiology at the same medical school that he had attended. He currently lives in New Delhi, India, and is an expert in mind-body medicine, yoga, and nutrition. He is also an inspirational speaker, an author, and a spiritual seeker. His story of hard work, perseverance, and seizing opportunities laid the foundation for our family values and principles. Both my sister and I have always been inspired by how he achieved so much despite beginning with so little. The sacrifices that his parents made before him and the sacrifices that both of our parents made for us as immigrants from India are the reason that I am here today. My sister and I are the first from either side of our family to be born and raised in America, and the story of how we got here has motivated us to pursue every opportunity and to value our education because we are so lucky to have endless possibilities and a better chance for a brighter future because of the sacrifices our family made before us. We grew up valuing books and storytelling because of the impact it had on my grandfather and the way he shared that impact with us. He is one of our closest relations in India, so he played a large role in shaping our cultural identity. From a young age, he would tell us the stories of different Hindu deities, including the famous epics of the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. He shared Indian fables that taught different life lessons and discussed many other relevant folk tales. These generational stories helped us connect to our roots and understand the festivals, holidays, religion, and art of our origin. He tells us of his life as a child and his journey to becoming a well-known published author with over 20 published books, not to mention hundreds of scientific papers, many blog posts, and numerous articles. His knowledge about yoga, spirituality, and psychology is impressive, and I would love to be as knowledgeable as him someday. He also imparted so much knowledge upon us about topics outside of his areas of expertise, like geometry, history, and astronomy, because his knowledge is so vast as a result of decades of reading. On his visits to America, we take walks around the neighborhood as he talks about mindfulness, his work projects, and his books, among other things. On our weekly Zoom meetings, he updates us on daily happenings at his spiritual home in India. He teaches me bits of Sanskrit, an ancient Indian language, which is the root for many other languages and can help to decipher ancient texts. He is such an inspiration for my sister because they share a passion for writing. She is beyond grateful for the time and effort he spent when asking her to send anything that she'd been writing and giving helpful feedback. He challenges her with existential questions and tells stories he's heard or about something he's reading. He encourages both of us to think deeper and helps give both of us a voice through discussion and writing. He shares his insights from best-selling authors he knows to help me write effectively. He encourages my sister to write well and write often, motivating her to find new ways to express herself and tell her story through writing. He is someone we wish to emulate when we grow up because he is such a big role model for us. He is truly a grandfather to everyone. Even if he were not my grandfather, I would be so grateful to have met him because he has a way of making everyone stop to listen, a straightforward way of imparting knowledge that simplifies complex topics, a moving life story, and an incredible career. He has a deeper respect and understanding for the value of opportunities, so he takes every chance to give back by donating the proceeds of his writing to charity and continuing to share his expertise with people of all ages. With his Yoga Education Spirituality YouTube channel, his articles, and his talks, he's reached so many people, and so many have been influenced, impacted, and encouraged, including my sister and I. Thank you for taking the time to hear about someone who means so much to me, my grandfather, whose presence continues to enrich my life every day. Thank you.
Again, I'm not crying, you're crying. Our final speaker tonight is OK Ndive. Yeah, you can come up. He is the author of several books, including novels Foreign Gods, Inc. and Arrows of Rain, as well as the memoir Never Look an American in the Eye. He's also a board member of the West Hartford Library Foundation, an organization that supports us here at the West Hartford Public Library.
Wow. Wow, this is amazing. Wow. Oh my gosh. So let me begin by saying good evening. We're going to have to do better. All right? So I come from a culture where you can't speak to any audience without giving a greeting. And if you don't hear back from them, that will be their very polite way of saying to you, take a hike. All right? So we're going to try again. All right? Good evening. Good evening. This is better. This is much better. Wow. So I really feel like an imposter for so many reasons. So what a distinguished cast of storytellers. And what an inspiring mentor that we have in Gertrude Blanks. As I listened to her story, I kept saying to myself, I must adopt this woman as a grandmother. I also feel like an imposter because I didn't have the fortune of having any grandparents. Both grandparents on my paternal and maternal sides had died before my parents married in 1958. So in a lot of ways, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to ask you to pretend that I'm one of my children. Because what I plan to do is to tell you about my mother, which is the closest thing that I have or I had to a grandmother. So if you don't mind, everything that I became in life and everything that I'm becoming in a lot of ways owes to my mother, who was a school teacher, my parents, broadly speaking, but my mother particularly. My mother was a school teacher. So when I was young, I wanted to do the things that a lot of young people like to do. Who can guess what it is? Waste a lot of time, because we have a lot of time, right? So we want to waste some of it, if not a lot of it. But my mother would make me, if I said to her, I want to go play soccer with friends, she said, okay, sit down and read 2 chapters from a book. And because she was a school teacher, I couldn't get away with just flipping the pages and saying, I've read the book. Because at the end of the reading, you had to take a test. And it was only if you read diligently and if there was a measure of comprehension that my mom would then offer you a little bit of time to go play soccer with your friends. And so for me, reading began as punishment. But as you know, if you read at all, I don't care how you get there, after a while it becomes, you fall in love with reading. So from punishment to enchantment. So I worried my parents a lot growing up. In fact, years ago, I was invited to my home state back in Nigeria to do my very first reading in my home state. Traveled around the world giving readings. And I'll call my mom in Nigeria and I'll say, I'm going to London to give a reading. I'm going to New York.
or to Los Angeles. And she said, what is this about? What kind of reading? What is the reading that you do? And so I'll say to her that I'll go to a library, a bookstore, and I'll break out one book and I'll read a few pages from it. I'll tell stories and people will buy books and I'll sign the books. So in 2014, a group of friends in my home state decided to bring me to my home state for the very first reading that I was going to do there. And they arranged to have the event broadcast live on state radio. So everybody in the state could hear this reading. And so somebody got up and as introductions go, said, okay, Ndibe, went to this secondary school, went to this college, went to the US, did his PhD here and there. And so I thought that the introduction was done with. And the guy said, well, for the real introduction, we're going to invite the woman who has known him the longest to give us the real one. And so out stepped my mother. Remember, this was being broadcast live on radio. And I had told my children, like every good Nigerian parent, you tell your children that in class you were always first. Yeah, every Nigerian parent was always first. Okay? And by the way, some of you may not understand this because in America you are not graded as such. But in Nigeria, from kindergarten, at the end of every term, you know who came first and who came last. So it's a very unforgiving system. So Nigerian parents will typically tell their children if they came second, they'll say, what are you doing coming second? I was always first, right? So I had given my kids that story. And here was my mom spoiling my story on state radio. My mom says to my friends and those who are listening in that this son of mine, a lot of you like him. But my mom said to the audience that my son worked very hard to fail. But she said my late husband and I used the cane to cane sense into him. So if you like him at all, it's thanks to the caning that we did. So when it came time for me to speak, I then asked whether there was a good, cruel attorney in the audience because I was going to sue my mom. Anyway, as I said, in retrospect, I came to thank my mother for stipulating that I had to read before she allowed me to go while away time. But the more important lesson that my mom taught me was the lesson of seeing the other. In Igbo language, I'm Igbo, that's my ethnicity and language in Nigeria, the word for love is ifunanya. Ifunanya literally means to see somebody with your eyes. Ifo, to see, nanya, with your eyes. That's love. So if you want to tell somebody that you love him or her, you say, Afongenanya, I'm seeing you with my eyes. So here was my mother exemplifying love, ifunanya, for us from a very young age, including when that idea, at least the way that she expressed it for me, was frightening when I was young. So here was this elderly woman in my hometown who was indeed a grandmother. She had several daughters and a son. And her son was particularly brilliant and had got a scholarship to go study in England. He was on the sea headed to England when he had some kind of sickness and died. In a society where a lot of people hold to superstition, people then cruelly accuse this woman of killing her own son. They said she had sacrificed her son in order to prolong her own, give herself longevity. And so this woman was ostracized in my hometown. In fact, people would be physically abusive of the woman. The only home to which the woman entered, and was my parents' home, and the only people that went to her home were my parents. Well, as a kid, hearing from everybody else in the community that this woman was indeed a witch who had sacrificed her son, it was frightening for me when the woman was invited by my parents to come join us for lunch or dinner. So I made a point to remark the plate that the woman ate from, or the cup that she drank from, because I wasn't going to use those subsequently. Because I felt if I touch the same plate or use the same cup, then of course she's going to come at night and kill me. As if this dread was not enough, on occasion my mom will prepare food and ask me alone to go to the woman's house and give her the food. This was frightening. So I would wake as I walked to the woman's home. And when I got there, I would knock on the door. She would say, come in. I'll barely open the door. I'll place the tray of food on the table and I'll push it. And I'll say, my mom asked me to give you this food. And as she was saying, how are your parents? I'll already be telling it out of there. As I said, oh, they are fine. They sent me to other errands. So to excuse myself. Of course, as one became mature, one came to recognize that what was done to this woman was cruel, was unjustified. But these were not necessarily cruel people. These were simply people who did not know better. And for years I had forgotten the story of this woman until my mother died in 2018. And her grandson wrote on Facebook, recalling that his own mother would not visit her mother because she was afraid of her mother. She had bought into that story. And she said it was my mother, my parents, who for years sustained his grandmother. So he wrote on Facebook to celebrate my mother. My wife and I and our daughter went to Nigeria for my mom's funeral. So I said my mom was a school teacher. And there were more than 2,000 people at our funeral. So my mom was an oddity. She was 33 when she married my father. At that age, this was a time in our country where if a woman was 18 and unmarried, you were considered almost a Neanderthal. My mom insisted on getting educated, and so she was 33 years old when my father, as 36, proposed to marry her. And so, of course, my father's relatives said, hell no, we're not doing that. And they said to my father, because they thought my mom had lied to him about her age, they said to my father, how old is she? And he said, 33. And they said, so you're not going to marry her? And he said, why not? And they said, because she will not be able to give you children. She's too old to give you children. And my father stunned his relatives when he said, but I love her. At that point, many men did not marry for love. You married for somebody to give you children. So the relatives said, you gotta be crazy. We're talking about children and you're talking about love. So my father threatened his relatives that he was going to go to my mother's family and announce his intention to take her as wife. And that's what settled it. He blackmailed his relatives to go with him. Because in my culture, if a man arrived at the doors of the proposed bride to announce that he wanted to marry the bride, it was a stain on the family, because marriage is not an individual thing, unlike here. So children here will find somebody they're in love with, and somebody will go on their knees and say, would you marry me? And then the family is informed. In my culture, you must go, you tell your family about the woman you've discovered, and they'll say to you, say nothing to her and then they would investigate the family, not the woman, the family. Finding out that the family is in good standing, they would then go with you to her family. And what they will say is, our family wants to marry into your family. And then they will say, this is the daughter of yours that we were interested in. And politely, the bride's family would tell the aspirant groom's family to go home. That will send you word, because they want to investigate the groom's family, not just the groom, the family. It's after this has happened and the two sides consider the two sides to be morally, physically, mentally fit, that negotiations then commence to consecrate the marriage. So when my father said, I'm going to go alone, his relatives knew that it will stain them, because it will say to the entire community that this guy is crazy. And if one person in the family is crazy, then the entire community, the entire family is crazy. And that's why they went with him. Well, my parents ended up having 5 of us, 5 children. And so my mother, when she turned 80, she died at 94. My siblings and I decided to throw her a party. Almost the entire community came out for that party. And a man called me aside who was about my mom's age. But because my mom had been a school teacher at a time when very few people went to school, she actually was able to teach people who were her age or even older. Because education was just coming in through the colonial project, British colonial enterprise. And so a man, an elder who was about my mom's age, called me aside and said, you see your mom? I said, yeah. I said, oh, she caned me so much. And he and I fell silent, and we gazed into each other's eyes, because I didn't know whether the man was going to say, yeah, I have no use for her. And then he said to me, but I'm grateful for all that caning, because I would have amounted to nothing in life. But because she did not spare the rod. Well, I was the perfect exemplar of my mother not sparing the rod. As I said, I was determined, in my mom's words, to fail. And in a lot of ways therefore, it was that reading that my mother instilled in me, the habit of reading, the love of reading, the enchantment that comes from literature, that saved my life. So I go around the world on the passport of literature, because my mother insisted that I learn. One more story and I'll be done, because I know some of us have not had dinner. So for years, my mother celebrated her birthday, April 18. So on April 18, if you remember, do something nice for somebody. So on every April 18, my mom will cook a lot of food, buy some drinks. You are not allowed to bring alcohol, but go to the prisons in Nigeria, and she will spend the entire day with prisoners, some of them in for life. And so in prison, they began to call her mother. And they were looking forward every year to April 18, because they knew that Mrs. Ndibe, who was called Ngala Kwesili, a woman worthy of pride, was a praise name, that Ngala would come with a lot of food. And not only did she feed the prisoners, but she spent the entire day telling them stories. She spent the entire day encouraging them, counseling them against recidivism, that those of them who were able to leave prison should ensure that they did not make it back into prison. And so when she died, as I said, we could barely have a word in. My siblings and I had to fight for the privilege of carrying her coffin, because there were so many contenders. So even though I didn't have a grandmother, and so once I was told that the theme of this storytelling session was going to be grandmothers, I said, I don't fit. But then I said, I might as well come and tell the story of the grandmother to my children. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to our amazing storytellers. I'm so glad that you were all here to have this wonderful experience with all of us. I hope that you will stay around. We'd love to chat some more. We have some refreshments in the back. And we also have an exhibit over on the side from our local history librarian, so please check it out. Thank you again for coming. Have a great evening.